Because, you see, we believe in God, suffering, while originally caused by sin, and therefore bad, is nonetheless something that God can, and frequently does, use. And you see, that's the very heart of the Christian gospel. Christ suffered. It was not a mistake. It was for a purpose.
Welcome to The God-Centered Life with Josh Moody. Judges, the 15th chapter, is where we're parking today. God is all-powerful, the name of this study. And it's part of our Judges study that we've called Get Over Yourself. Josh Moody is senior pastor of College Church in Wheaton, Illinois, and I'm Todd Bastide. We're glad you're joining us today. Josh, an interesting approach to this portion of the Samson narrative. It sounds like you're going to show us how God can use pain?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly. And how important that is, because we all are in pain at times, and we can think that somehow God doesn't understand, or he's forgotten, or it can't make sense of the Christian faith, and yet woven throughout the Bible is an answer to that, and we're going to look at that through one particular lens, a powerful lens in the story of Samson.
Excellent. As a bit of context, this message was originally delivered in December of 2007, and around the time of an acceleration of deployment in the war in Iraq, and you'll hear mention of that. Judges chapter 15, in focus today, God is all-powerful. Here's Josh.
Judges chapter 15, beginning at verse 1. Later on, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, "I'm going to my wife's room." But her father would not let him go in. "I was so sure you thoroughly hated her," he said, "that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing corn of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing corn together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told, "Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend." So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" "We have come to take Samson prisoner," they answered, "to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." They said to him, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "Agreed," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came towards him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramath Lehi, which means jawbone hill. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkore, which means caller's spring, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Well, pain. Pain is something that it's pretty difficult to forget. when you've experienced it, isn't it? And I don't just mean the kind of pain when you hit your thumb with a hammer, or you stub your bare toe against a table leg, or maybe you're playing sport and you pop your knee out of joint. No, those kind of things are hard to forget as well. But the kind of pain I have in mind when I'm looking at this passage, as we are this morning, is the sort of emotional pain that leads to a pattern of behavior that expresses how hard it is to move on from that experience of pain. And I guess, as I said, we all know what I mean. I remember 1 year some while ago in my life when at the end of the year, I looked back on that whole year, and for various reasons, I suddenly realized that I had literally cried every day for a whole year. And given that I'm the kind of person who grew up in a boarding school where any demonstration of emotion was certainly culturally discouraged, like Pink Floyd put it, exposing every weakness, however carefully hidden by the kids, you're pretty careful about that. It was sort of for me, wow, that's really, amazing, every day for a year. My family was the kind of family where my parents came out, when my parents came out here to see us one time, and we were seeing them off at the airport, and I gave my dad a hug, and I said, "I love you, Dad." His response was, "See you in July." Which didn't mean he didn't love me, nor that I didn't realize he did, just that, stiff upper lip British kind of culture, which is a caricature incidentally. But anyway, you get the point. And so it was just, wow. Had I been hurting that bad to cry every day for a year? It became a kind of sort of interesting scientific observation for me, wow, really. Now, if you haven't been through something like that, you've probably just not been alive very long. I remember saying to a mentor when I was an undergraduate student and sort of conscious of my privileged position that I noticed that in the Bible, suffering was related to maturity. And I didn't think, you see, that I really suffered that much by then. And so I wonder whether I should pray for suffering. And his kind of response was, don't worry, that's the kind of thing that life will bring along all on its own. You see, what we have here in this passage is a lot of pain. You have Samson's pain about his marriage. You have the Philistines' anger about Samson. You have the Timnites' pain as one of their own is burnt to death. You have the Israelites' fearful pain at the consequence of Samson's guerrilla warfare campaign, and on, pain and anger and suffering. It's almost like a cue for Yoda to come in and say, isn't it? Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, or whatever it is, right? Now, of course, we're dealing with something more profound, much more profound than that. Because, you see, we believe in God, suffering, while originally caused by sin, and therefore bad, is nonetheless something that God can, and frequently does, use. And you see, that's the very heart of the Christian gospel. Christ suffered. It was not a mistake. It was for a purpose. And so here in this passage, we're exploring some of these mysteries of providence, the sense in which God is weaving the threads of our lives together into a beautiful tapestry. But we don't always see that. And how can we gain a perspective on life, on war, on pain, such that we have a good answer to what I think is the central question of the passage, which you'll see in verse 6. Who did this? Now, the Philistines are just looking for the human answer. But of course, it also raises the bigger question, who's involved here? Why? What's going on? Who's this judge who's doing these things? And I say, if you've ever been through anything and wonder, still today, what God was up to, or are going through anything like that right now, and if you're not, and you haven't, you will, then this narrative here, with its interweaving of divine purpose in the midst of very human sin and suffering, will, I believe, be encouraging. And so let's look at it together.
Some examples of divine purpose in the midst of suffering coming up next, but just prior to that, we'd love to have you take advantage of our contact page. How are you listening? Where are you listening? What studies are landing specifically for you? All of this would be incredibly encouraging to us. That contact page is on our website at godcenteredlife.org. We'll say thanks in advance. Looking forward to hearing from you. Back into Judges now. Here's Josh.
Well, the first thing I think we see here is that God can use bad marriages. I'm sure we have to conclude that from this story of Samson's marriage, don't we? I mean, you couldn't get a much worse situation than the first 3 verses of this chapter, could you? And yet, as the story unfolds, we see again the truth of what the storyteller has already told us about this marriage, which is chapter 14, verse 4. This was from the Lord. It's kind of set up that way to see that in that perspective. That whatever we think about it, it was still from the Lord. And it was pretty bad. To begin with, she wasn't one of God's people, which we saw last week. But then here, in this bit, in the first few verses here, because Samson had left in such a huff after the secret of his riddle had been given away by his wife, the father-in-law concludes that he really can't want her anymore, and so he gives her to his friend. And as I say, you can't get much worse than that, can you? I mean, just imagine the scene. Samson comes along with a nice young goat. It's a beautiful day. It's harvest time. Everything's in bloom. He's got his young goat. I might have recommended a bunch of flowers, but there you go. He's trying to make amends. He rocks up at the home, and what does he discover? Wife, now married to best man. So whether, because the father-in-law feels badly for Samson or has a bad conscience for what he did, or whether he's just plain frightened that Mr. Universe here might get mad, like the Incredible Hulk, don't make me angry, you won't like me when I'm angry kind of thing, Samson here, sure, go ahead, have the younger daughter, you must stop Samson from turning green kind of thing, give him girl. Isn't she more attractive? We're not sort of dealing with high-octane theories of how to save your marriage before it starts or something like that. If you thought the older was a hottie, look at this over here. Take her instead. Go on, Samson. Don't get angry with me, please. So this is just about as bad as it could possibly be. And Samson gets mad and does this weird thing with the foxes and their tails. There's a wonderful tradition, actually, of saying that it's possible, this bit with the foxes and the tails. You see, people are trying to explain it and understand how on earth this could have happened. And so there's a tradition of saying that actually these were jackals, not foxes. Same Hebrew word, you see. It's possible, I suppose. And sort of saying then this tradition, some scholars saying that because jackals go in packs, unlike foxes, this would have been relatively easy to do. I'm not sure that explains it, 300 foxes, difficult. 300 jackals, piece of cake, did it before. Did breakfast this morning. Again, it's from God. God is somehow using this. It's his power in Samson. He's seeking to break off the worldly compromise between his covenant people and the pagan nations who are worshipping other gods. And so, as I say, God can use bad marriages. Now, I'm not encouraging you to go and get one, any more than I'm encouraging you to go and get 300 foxes. But I am pointing out this morning the sovereign power of God, even in the midst of this most terrible pain. When I talk to people about relationships, whether people longing to have one or people longing to improve one, it sometimes occurs to me that we look at things the wrong way round. Christmas, of course, is a fantastic time of year, isn't it? It's also the time of year that can be tough for people in this regard. Some people feel lonely. If you've got a family, I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for those around who are looking for a place to go at Christmas, a home. That can be a wonderful ministry, just inviting them. Helps us to get out of ourselves, in our own families. But Christmas can be a tough time for families too. There are all these expectations of having a really good time, aren't there? It's like the old best man wedding joke, the one, I never knew what happiness was until I got married, and then it was too late. Christmas comes, and as a season of peace and goodwill to all men becomes a season of stress and challenge for all human relationships, those even that we are most close to in reality. And I think sometimes, you see, we get it all wrong. We think there is a direct proportional relationship to the perfection of that relationship we have and the extent to which God can use it. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not encouraging bad marriages. But I think part of the problem is we can get kind of a little OCD, no one's quite good enough for us, or our knight in shining armor is rusting up, or our damsel in distress is getting stressed. See, God doesn't wait for the perfect marriage before he can use us. He uses us exactly as we are. We're willing for that. Marriage, isn't really about finding just the right perfect person. It's about being just the right person. It's about a commitment between two sinners, about God and his unbreakable purpose in our lives. And so as we look at this, I think if anyone was a cure for kind of perfectionism, it's Samson, isn't it? Sometimes say God uses sinners all the time. After all, if he didn't, he wouldn't ever get anything done, would he? Even less than perfect marriages. Even this marriage, for goodness sake. Well, we also see here that God can use invading armies. And so, as the story goes on, you see the Philistines who say it's very relevant to all of us who experience any kind of pain whatsoever. And here's another one. God can use invading armies. Naturally enough, the Philistines are pretty fed up by all this, and they take out their vengeance on Samson's in-laws, don't they? Because they're easier to find or less intimidating than, Mr. Hercules Samson or whatever. And the fate of his in-laws may have been sealed by the threat that was given to them in the previous chapter, verse 15, where they were told if they didn't cooperate, they would be burnt to death. And now the Philistines assume that this is all their fault. And so they carry out, they burn them to death as they are threatened to do. And then Samson, in this cycle that so often occurs with deep pain, heaped upon pain, takes his vengeance on their vengeance. The kind of gangland escalating violence of which we are very familiar in our world, aren't we? I mean, forgiveness and the gospel of mercy and peace is very far from this situation, isn't it? And then again, next step in this escalation, as it gets worse and worse, the Philistines now invade. Verse 9, they invade Judah. And they go out to fight the whole nation. So this is bad, right? I suspect none of us here have ever lived in a country that has suffered under the hands of an invading army or occupying force. I mean, if you ever looked into it at all or read about it, the results seem to be usually pretty terrible for the inhabitants, of course. There's brutal disregard for humanity, a tendency to treat the citizens of the occupied territory as less than fully human, a wholesale takeover of property and means of subsistence for the purposes of the army that can lead to desperate poverty for the citizens. And sometimes any resistance is met with vicious recriminations from the army. I don't know whether you've ever been to any of the famous battlefields of the Civil War, or the mass graveyards of the First World War in France, or have read, for instance, the occupying forces' treatment of natives in Crete, or Genghis Khan, or any of these, and much more. And surely their techniques were less sophisticated than today, but the basic reality of the sword, well, that's changed very little. Now, of course, you see, we live in a time of war. Our country is not invaded, but we know a country that is. War is the most deeply controversial part of our current political scene. And I will never use this pulpit to make party political statements of whatever kind. But I do want you to not be frightened that God cannot use this war, whatever your opinion of its beginning, its conduct, or its likely end results. God, later in the Bible, will describe a massive local empire, pagan to its core, as his club, his tool with which he is using. Or Psalm 46, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. Be still and know that I am God, the psalmist writes. I will be exalted among the nations, I will be exalted in the earth. So do not for one moment allow the idea to enter your head that God was looking the other way when America invaded Iraq. I am neither the prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I know this: God can use invading armies. And that's true whether you are in the standpoint of seeing them as forces of liberation or invasion. It's not a political point, it's purely about theology. God is in charge. And you see, the source of that is not in the intention of the general or the president or the king. The source of that is in God himself. So Proverbs 21 verse 1 famously says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a watercourse wherever he pleases. Now here, at least, that was to provoke God's people to repentance. In the end, for God to exercise some kind of discipline in relation to them, and for the Philistines likewise to be called to account. It doesn't make war and bloodshed good. Again, Psalm 46. He, that is God, makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields of fire. He's going to sort it out. It is his purpose to bring about peace by sending the Prince of Peace, Christ himself, to be born for us, so making peace between God and man, and thereby inaugurating a kingdom that will last forever, where in the end there will be no more crying or pain, for the old world things would have passed away. But now, God can still use it. He has before. Torture, terror, and war are things that are not so big and so bad that God cannot use. As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. But no, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who has loved us.
That's Josh Moody, and this is The God-Centered Life. Okay, what God can use? So far we've covered bad marriages and invading armies. Now, for the moment, America is not being plagued by the latter, but bad marriages, unfortunately, that's a different story. Josh, talk to the individual who is in that camp and wants God to be using that sour relationship in some way for eternal good.
Yeah, it's always hard because there's so much pastoral counseling related to that. So if I was talking to an individual like that, the first thing I want to do is explore. It's, I think, a huge mistake pastorally to try and come up with a solution before you really understand the problem. And medically, we never do that. You always need to diagnose the problem before you start prescribing medication. So maybe, given that I can't on air have a long conversation, I could just bring up a few that can be common. The tendency to not forgive seems so simple, but I have found that marriages that do not practice daily, certainly weekly, I'm sorry, and then the other person saying, I forgive you, tend to get into trouble. And of course, at the back of that is a theological mistake. You have married a sinner, and here's a newsflash, you're a sinner too. And they need to forgive you, and you need to forgive them. And it comes back to humility. And really, I say about our family that we don't run on law, we run on grace. And one of the things I've tried to put into the architecture of our family life is, I'm sorry, I forgive you, because we all need grace. And so I think that will be one commonality across marriages, is there tends to be a lack of forgiveness or a lack of humility to ask for forgiveness. That said, in the famous line, all good families are the same, but all difficult families are difficult in their own ways. It can be so many different kinds of things going on. So my main advice would be, if that's your situation, would you make sure you find a godly Christian, a leader, a pastor, and start to talk with him about the issue.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Josh. A Bible-based church with a staff that strives to apply God's Word to everything they do. This may not be the first resource that comes to mind when you're contemplating getting help for your struggling marriage, but the church is the body of Christ. And if we believe in the power of God to heal any situation, then, as Josh has just exhorted us, it may be time to find someone within a healthy church to help us pursue that healing. Now, if you're listening in the Chicago area and don't currently have a church home that is feeding you from God's Word, the doors of College Church are open and waiting. You can learn more about the church on our website, godcenteredlife.org. We'd love to have you swing by for a visit, or again, if you're in the area, make us your church home. And the contact page is also ready and waiting. Share a prayer request with us, and our staff will consider it a privilege to pray for you. That web address again, godcenteredlife.org. Continuing our look at the book of Judges, next time we get together, is this gangster rap?
With a donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men. Samson seems to have a taste for these kind of things, doesn't he? Constructing easily memorable and rather raw poems. I think he was the gangster rapper of his day, myself.
Samson laying down some rhymes when we get together next time. We hope you're going to join us for that. GodCenteredLife.org, our website with resources for you. And this is your invitation to join us for the next edition of The God-Centered Life with Josh Moody.